This is the bearded dragon you see in a ton of the backgrounds of my videos. Since it's been about a year and a half since I last did a video all about him, I thought I would do kind of an update and just kind of an introduction for those of you who are newer and did not see that video. Also, that video was filmed very shortly after getting him, so I didn't know a ton about him, but now I can go over my experiences with him over the past year and a half or so. So a couple years ago, we got an email from someone, a pretty standard email, saying that they needed to rehome a bearded dragon to us. They had gone into a little bit about the husbandry. They admitted they didn't really know what they were doing, and there was a lot of care problems. They were also aware that he had metabolic bone disease, which I talk about in pretty much every video, which really affects the bone development of the animals. If I remember correctly, I think Stan was originally from Petco or PetSmart. They had gotten him as a baby, and they had him for 10 years. We were actually vending at a show called Repticon in North Carolina, because we were selling then. I no longer do expos, but at the time, we figured they could just come and drop him off, so that they didn't have to pay shipping or anything, and he was very old, so who knows if he would have even survived shipping based on his quality of life when he came to us. The time came at Repticon, and they dropped him off, and they were very sad to see him go. They also gave us a bunch of supplies, including the diet that he had been eating for a decade, and that was Zoomed bearded dragon pellets. Basically, for those 10 years, he was eating the bearded dragon pellets, living on calcium sand, and had very minimal lighting, and that's resulted in this thing. Now, he is pretty old, granted. Bearded dragons do not live very long in the wild, and so he's way past the natural lifespan, but in captivity they can definitely live longer, and Stan is pretty up there. We didn't know if he would live a couple weeks, a couple months, a couple years, based on just how he looked. And so our plan was to just keep him around, see how he does, because he would probably pass away pretty soon after getting him, just because he had been through a lot. After Repticon, we kind of looked at him more closely and noticed a lot more physical things. Not only are his body parts just kind of solidified in place at these really awkward front positions, but his femoral pores, which all male bearded dragons have, where they secrete oils to basically mark territory, the pores were just completely clogged and filled up with some sort of substance. We later realized the substance was a mix of the dried oils that naturally secrete and likely a mix of calcium sand. This is one of the reasons I don't recommend putting bearded dragons on loose substrate, because it does contribute to that. But also, this is something that can be avoided if you do make sure your bearded dragon soaks pretty often. I would say you can get by without ever soaking a bearded dragon, and it could stay perfectly healthy. But we also have noticed that soaking it occasionally, like maybe every couple weeks or so, is a good way to kind of make sure that they're pretty clean. You don't want to use soap or anything, but just nice warm water. And it also helps to ensure that those pores stay kind of loosened up. So they were bad, and we ended up having to squeeze them out. It was our first time dealing with the femoral pores. Also, he did not eat for almost a month. I think it was 2 to 3 weeks at the minimum, where he refused to touch anything. I threw away the pellets, which I shouldn't have, and so I bought more pellets, which I used in the first video of him, to see if he would eat those instead. Because we had tried dubias, mealworms, crickets, all sorts of veggies like collard greens, kale, fruits like strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, all sorts of things that bearded dragons usually love, and he just wouldn't touch any of it. So he lost a little bit of weight over those couple weeks, but not much, because that's not too long for a reptile in general. But we had not had a bearded dragon just refuse to eat before. So in that first video of him, I got the pellets, I mixed them up, and I offered them to him, and he didn't eat them. But he did randomly eat a dubia roach. It really caught me off guard. He was in kind of a slightly stressful situation because he had these bright lights, he was on a table with 2 people around him, doing like all this motion while I was filming, and that's when he decided to first eat a dubia roach. After that, I think we got him to eat tomato. Tomato is one of the most acidic foods you can give a bearded dragon. A lot of people get upset when I even mention offering tomato to a bearded dragon because they just think it's so bad for them. Now, yeah, it'll probably cause a little upset tummy ache if they eat a lot of it in one sitting, and if they're constantly eating tomato, it can likely cause internal issues just because of the contents the tomato is made up of. But Stan loves tomato. I think of it as kind of like a hard cider for him. It might not be the healthiest thing, but he enjoys it, and I give it to him every so often. It's kind of his little splurge, it's his dessert. I don't know why he likes tomato. I've had other beardies eat tomato, but they never prefer it over everything else. So from the very start, his favorite food was tomato, and that's what we used to kind of get them to start eating. One good trick is to use similarly colored foods, because bearded dragons do identify colors pretty well in our experience, where they will often have a preference of color in food. And I'm sure they don't exactly process colors the same way, but it could even just be shades of lighter and darker. There are differences there that we've noticed. So if Stan likes tomato, we can try, say, strawberry or raspberry, because they're also red. And he also really enjoyed the dubia roaches. He wasn't a big mealworm or superworm fan at first, but over time, he started eating everything. Something else we've noticed is once he did start eating mealworms and superworms, he actually does not digest them very well. They often come out of him exactly as they went in. It looks like they just died. But actually he ate them, they went through his entire digestive system, and they came out. And we have had dubias come out this way with him a couple times, but most of the time he does the best digesting dubias. So that is an example that not all animals can digest things the same way. Like leopard geckos, we've noticed some do perfect with mealworms and perfect with superworms and only eat those and refuse everything else, while other leopard geckos have much more sensitive stomachs and cannot digest them, and they come out whole. So you want to make sure that gets broken down, and those leopard geckos that do that just get fed crickets or dubias. I hate crickets still, but we do have to get them sometimes for those special cases. But the dubias have worked really well with Stan. So yeah, more about his husbandry. The three big issues was A, he was only eating pellets, which although they have what they need, there's no enrichment here. And although they can survive off of them, as you could tell, because he did survive off of them, it's not a good variety, and there is still going to be a lack in certain vitamins or minerals, or just things that they need, whether it's too much protein or too little of something else. That's why a varied diet's really good. So he had never eaten insects, never eaten fruits or vegetables as far as we know, and it was just those pellets. Second, he was on calcium sand, which is known to cause impaction. Some people argue that sand never causes impaction, or that it only does if the husbandry is wrong. But in our experience, we've gotten lots of animals in where we hear all the husbandry information and it's all perfect, where the only issue is that they're on sand, and they end up showing signs of impaction. So I don't think that that argument is correct, but either way, calcium sand is laced with a vitamin that they can recognize and smell. And reptiles often know when they have a calcium deficiency, so they go and lick this sand, they consume it, and when it gets wet, it clogs together and clumps up into sand. Think of like making a sandcastle. You get it wet, it clumps, and it suddenly is a lot harder to work with. This happens inside their intestines or their stomach, or wherever there's moisture basically, and it clogs up over time, blocking their organs. And usually you don't actually know that this happened until it's too late. Leopard geckos, for example, you can actually start to see the sand. Like if you're using black sand, we've gotten leopard geckos where you can see very dark blobs in there, and you can kind of lubricate it up, like for example, feeding them a little bit of olive oil or things that actually help it pass through their system can work. But usually you can only see it if there's already such a huge clump that they're going to need surgery, or it's too late and they die. So thankfully Stan did not actually seem impacted, but his femoral pores were definitely impacted. And I think him sitting on that sand all the time definitely contributed to that. I think he had a heat lamp, but I don't think he had UVB, which also contributed to why his bones are so oddly formed and cannot be fixed. It's definitely not repairable. Like I said, it's been between 1 and 2 years, and there's been no change whatsoever. His current setup is a pretty small enclosure. I think it's a 12 by 12 by 36 or 30, 12 by 12, whatever a 40 gallon is, but shorter. He doesn't need the height. He can barely climb as it is. His current enclosure is very small because although he used to be in larger enclosures, all he would ever do is move between the basking and the water bowl, and then wherever the food is. He never had any interest in using hides. I have a hide in there, but he's never in it. He always just falls asleep on his basking spot, and so there was no point in him having that extra space. If you have a healthy bearded dragon, I would not do an enclosure this small. For example, Nettie, my slightly younger, better cared for bearded dragon, is in an enclosure about twice as long as this one, although it is the same height. Again, he doesn't really need to climb, but he actually takes advantage of that space around it. And as you can see, he's still pretty good at climbing, so we do have a basking spot in there. And he is a great example of how well individual animals can adapt to their shortcomings. Like Stan sucks at climbing. You would expect him to suck at climbing at least, but he makes it work. He just flails his legs like crazy, and he's able to get to where he needs to be. But we do make it easier by having a pretty flat basking spot and a small enclosure where he can easily access everything. The water bowl, normally we give bearded dragons bowls that they can actually climb into and completely fit in when it's filled with water. This allows them to choose when they soak. If they get a little too hot, they can go soak. If they need to pass stool, this often helps them, and it keeps them from clogging their femoral pores up, for example. Also, obviously, if they're thirsty, they can go soak and drink in it. But Stan, although he probably could climb out, I'm just a little too worried about that, so we use smaller bowls with him, where it's big enough for him to go to and drink out of, but he cannot actually soak in them. But we keep a close eye on him, and we keep track of his stool and how often he passes stuff to make sure he's not clogged up and make sure he's not constipated. And if he ever does go too long, we can just soak him and then monitor him so that we make sure he doesn't drown. Because it would be kind of sad if Stan drowned. Stan's my favorite animal in the house, so that'd be kind of awkward. Like I said, we thought he was gonna die shortly after getting him, and he did not. He just kept on trucking away, which was great. And so I really wanted to keep him, but we were really limited on space, and the person I was working with previously on Emerald Scales insisted that we should go ahead and find a new home for him to open up space, because a 40-gallon that he was in was a lot of space for something else. I didn't like the idea, but I didn't fight it too much because I figured that we should just use the space. So what we did is we found an individual person who had mentioned wanting him. I think they were on Instagram, and we reached out to them and we're like, do you want to take them? And they said, yeah. They set up an enclosure, and then right before we were going to ship them, and then about a week or two before we were going to ship them, Stan's femoral pores started looking even worse, and we were worried he might even lose his legs. So for this reason, we ended up holding him back and not shipping him yet, and we wanted to make sure his legs healed up completely. His leg issue is kind of a different story, which maybe I can get into a different point. So it started with just one of his legs. That one finally healed up, and then we were worried the second leg started looking pretty bad too, and we had to hold him for even longer. And then at this point, it was just kind of set on the back burner to ship him off. I wasn't going to remind anyone he needed to be shipped because I didn't even want to ship him in the first place. And then eventually I split with the person I was working with, and I made sure that I got Stan when we split, and he never went to the person. So I would have been really sad if he had been shipped off, and I'm really glad that he wasn't, because I was not firm enough on my view that we should keep him. But now I'm keeping Stan. Actually, I can't remember, because originally the person met us at Repticon so that they didn't have to ship, so it might have actually been a local person that was going to take Stan. I think they were a state or two away, but they might have been willing to drive, but I don't actually have access to that conversation anymore because I don't have the Instagram account, so I can't check this. Either we were going to ship him, which is kind of weird because he wasn't really in a state to be shipped, or they were going to drive and locally meet us, but I can't actually confirm that or not. But he's here, so it doesn't matter now. But yeah, other than that, his enclosure it has tile, which has become my favorite substrate to use, or I guess base thing to use with bearded dragons. It's smooth and easy to clean, it's waterproof, and it looks good. So we just get tile from Home Depot. It's adhesive, you can cut it, and you just stick it in the bottom, and then clean it as needed. It's less wasteful than paper towel, and it looks better. It's cleaner than reptile carpet, and it's pretty cheap too. Lighting wise, we have 2 UVB on them. It's a UVB tube light, and then that thing that looks like a red heat bulb, it's actually a second UVB, one of the curly ones, and a halogen bulb, which get pretty hot. So it looks like a cheap red light from afar, but it's actually one of the small halogens that work really well. And then all the lights go off at night. The nighttime temperature in here is in the 70s, which is fine for them. And then in the morning, they pop back on. So his daily routine is basically wake up on his basking spot, bask, get angry, and then eat, drink some, and go to sleep. And that's his day. But let's go a bit more into his angry side, and that is Stan bobbing at everything. He's done this from the moment we got him. The first day he came in, he immediately just started bobbing like crazy, which means either A, he's territorial, or B, he is maybe interested in mating. Now, they do this at other bearded dragons. Bobbing their head means that they are trying to assert themselves as the dominant one, and then doing that little wave, which he does as well, means that he's submitting, and he's the submissive one. He's letting the other animal claim that territory, be in that area. Don't mess with me, I'm not going to fight you. But Stan does both. He bobs, and then he waves, and then he waves, and then he bobs. And I don't know what he's trying to tell them, or who he's trying to tell, because there doesn't even have to be an animal there. I've never had a bearded dragon both bob and wave at nothing before. Normally they only do it when there's another animal in the room, and most often it's at other bearded dragons. So sometimes we'll put dividers in between them, and like I said, they do release those oils, those femoral oils, so it's possible that's what they're picking up. So to test this, I put them in a dark tub, which was completely solid on all sides, and I put him in a completely separate room that animals were not kept in, and he kept bobbing and he kept waving, because some people thought maybe he's doing it at his reflection in the glass, but he was in a solid opaque tub and he just kept on doing it. So that kind of confirmed, after keeping him in there for a while, that he doesn't need another animal to bob at. That's why we think Stan is a little schizophrenic, because he bobs at nothing, and we've tested it many times. It's legitimately at nothing. For that reason, that's why you're always seeing him bob, but if he does actually see an animal, then he goes extra crazy. And in a way, although he's probably very angry, it almost seems like a form of enrichment. You'll notice he's very lean. You can almost see his spine, which has always been there at this point. Like, if you're a bearded dragon, if you can see the spine right here, that's not a good sign unless they are very old or have other problems, because that means they are underweight. But Stan eats a ton all the time, and we can confirm he's not parasitic. He would not be doing this well if he was. And I think partially he just gets so much enrichment. For example, climbing up on his basking spot takes a lot of energy. So he probably exerts, I would guess, 4 times as much energy as a normal bearded dragon trying to get to a basking spot. And that's a good workout for him. And he does bob a lot. He runs around, he runs back and forth on the enclosure, and we get him to chase food, so he gets a lot of exercise. He doesn't have a ton of muscle. I can feel them, but they're very small muscles, but I think they work for old man Stan. Human-wise, he's never ever shown any aggression or defensiveness towards any person, and he's naturally super comfortable with anyone that comes up to him. He's not scared, he's not worried, nothing. He's completely just deadpan when you walk up to him, and he doesn't care what you're doing. You can poke at him as much as you want. Dealing with his pores, he was really good at it, and really he took it like a champ, partially because he legitimately doesn't have any feeling in his back legs. You can squeeze him as much as you want, which I won't do, but we're pretty sure he no longer has any nerves in his back legs. So, fun fact about Stan, do whatever you want to his legs, cut him off, he won't know the difference, other than the fact that he'll probably bleed out very quickly. I don't actually know what Morphe is. I've never even thought about it, honestly. He's got black nails, so he's not a hypo. He has very cool eyes. His eyes are definitely his coolest feature, I think, because they just stare straight through your soul. And then he's very yellow. He doesn't look super fancy or super crazy, and his neck is pretty much always black. Sometimes it's a little more yellow, and when they turn their beards black, it's because they're upset, and his is kind of always just a weird in between. But he's by far one of the most alert animals in the house, and one of the best eaters now, even though he started as one of the worst. And Stan is basically almost 12 years old at this point, which is pretty good. If you had asked me when we got him how long I thought he was gonna survive, I probably would have said less than 6 months, to like on the hopeful side, but so far he's quadrupled that, and who knows, he could still drop dead next week, or maybe he'll last another few years, but time will tell how Stan does. I think it's kind of funny how I went from never wanting a bearded dragon to getting a bearded dragon to end up liking a bearded dragon I didn't even intend on keeping more than the bearded dragon I got. Because Nettie's cool, but I like Stan more. And I have, I guess, 3 personal beardies. It's Stan, Nettie, and then Geode, who have not actually shown on the channel, but it's a completely scaleless bearded dragon that was rehomed to us. So, oh my. I'll do a video on scaleless bearded dragons at some point. Spoiler, it's kind of like the spider ball python thing where I am pretty passionate about not supporting the breeding of them, but you can Google those if you're curious what they look like. Thankfully, Stan is not scaleless. He's not even a leatherback. He's just got normal spikes, and he never uses his spikes. But he does some like physical abilities they have. Like, for example, Pancake is probably the 2nd most popular bearded dragon name after Spike, but they pancake out and into this flat shape when they're basking, so they can really absorb as much heat and as much UVB as possible. And he does still do that, but he never actually pokes out or puffs out of aggression or defense or anger, and he's never stabbed me with a spike. So I appreciate it. So a year and a half into keeping Stan, he's only done better over time. He's continually improved, and I think we've really refined his setup to perfectly fit his odd disabilities and his age and everything. He's in a room that has other animals, but nothing that actually irritates or frustrates him unless I'm filming a video and there's something on the table that he's not a fan of. Again, I would not use this size enclosure for a healthy adult bearded dragon, but it works perfectly for Stan. So remember that the same setup doesn't work for every animal. You gotta kinda make things work for your animal. So this is the backstory and updates on Gruncle Stan, the man himself. Hopefully you enjoyed. Check out the description for a bunch of random things I have. There's products I recommend, some coupon codes to different sites. Those are all affiliate links, so I get paid every time you use any of that stuff. You can also buy merchandise. There is a new design on the site, which I have not actually shown in a video yet because my own order isn't here yet, but it's in the mail and I'll be able to show that to you shortly. You can support my videos through Patreon if you'd like, and you get access to a private Discord server. You can message me personally. You can watch private live streams and a bunch of other stuff. But this is Stan. I'll continue updating you. You'll keep seeing him in the background, and I'm Alex. So that's it. Thanks for watching.
施錠をしたとはいえ、こんな古い木の扉なんて